and talk with you. I miss being in the building. I miss seeing our friends. And of course, I miss bringing you guys food and cookies. Kina, you know that one was thrown at you.
Oh, I miss those M&M cookies so badly.
I thought what I would do today, since it's been a little bit of a break for us, is definitely talk about those sensitive situations. And I have a few that I would like to speak on. However, I thought we'd go back to basics just to kind of get an idea on why things occur with our loved ones, why these things happen, possibly, and just talk about having a basic understanding of what this thing called dementia is. So if you'll bear with me, I just want to explain dementia a little bit, maybe talk about a few different types of dementia. And then, of course, as Kina was saying earlier, please feel free to throw questions at me as you feel the need to or need a question answered. So dementia, this word dementia, it's kind of a misnomer or misnomer. So many people think that it is a disease all in itself, but it's really not a specific disease. It's kind of a general term to talk about a decline in a mental ability that is severe enough to interfere with what we call our activities of daily living. Those things that we're able to do with our daily life. You see, our brains literally end up deteriorating based off of something that is called plaque. Not necessarily like the plaque that you have on your teeth, but that's the term that they use. Dementia is an overall term that describes a wide range of symptoms. Those symptoms are associated with typically a decline in memory or other thinking skills. And again, it affects those ADLs, the activities of daily living. Some of the types of dementia that are out there, the most common type people think about would be Alzheimer's. But there's also things to think about such as Lewy body disease or vascular dementia. Some people are familiar with a term called PICS, that's also known as frontotemporal, or even Parkinson's or Huntington's. All these are types of dementia that people unfortunately experience, and each one of those have their own set of symptoms or traits, if you will, that come along with those. So that's just kind of a quick background on dementia itself. Some of the signs or symptoms that people seem to experience, and some of these may sound familiar to us and what we have experienced with our loved one, and some maybe are not. It really depends on the individual and their own physiology. But there's poor judgment skills at times, and it might be hard for individuals to make a certain decision. There's an inability to maintain a budget. There's losing track of date or time, or even the season. People have a tendency to forget that they might already be home. They might say they want to be home, but they're actually in their own house. Sometimes the symptoms are difficulty to carry on a conversation. And this can be two ways. It could be that I have an inability to communicate verbally to you, or as you speak to me, I might not be able to decipher what it is you're saying. And of course, there's the common symptom of misplacing things or being unable to retrace those steps to find where we put something. Even it might just be on a desk or a table there in front of us. Now, sometimes people will say, well, I personally experience those things. Does that mean that I have early onset? No, not necessarily. There are, as we get older, we have typical age-related changes. Um, we might forget where we put something down, but sooner or later we tend to locate it. And if we happen to stumble upon it, we'll remember that we were looking for it earlier. We might make a bad decision every once in a while. Um, those are just things that just occur with being human. Some quick facts about dementia, just to kind of give you an idea of the number of people that are experiencing it. Um, the last reported number that was, I believe it was in 2017, showed that there was a estimated 5.4 million people in America of all ages that are suffering from the signs of dementia. And so if you say there's 5.4 million people diagnosed with this disease, that also means there's a number of folks out there that are not diagnosed with it, that are going through that experience. But let's take it one step further. For those 5.2 million people that have been diagnosed with it, there's at least that many caregivers. There's that many of us trying to care for our loved ones. So you can see now we're up to 10, 11 million people within the United States that are literally suffering from this disease, whether we are diagnosed with the disease or whether we're caregiving for someone with the disease. So you see it really is a huge thing that's happening across our land. We're all having to deal with the effects of the COVID-19 pandemic right now, but the disease dementia, that in itself is a global pandemic as well. Just a couple more statistics and we'll move on with this. Of course, we know that this is a progressive disease, meaning that there is not necessarily a cure that's been found for it as of yet. But by mid-century, someone in the United States will develop the disease, I believe they're saying every 33 seconds. And that's kind of a sobering thought. So anyway, let's talk about some things that will be more of a pick-me-up, some tips and tricks that we can use on some things that we might experience on a day-to-day basis. Before we do that, I'm going to do a screen share here and just show you what this disease does to a normal brain. And I say a normal brain, of course I put those in quotes. And hopefully you'll be able to see what it is I'm showing here. Over here on the right side of your screen, hopefully you'll be able to see it. You'll see, you might see my mouse going back and forth. You will see two brains, one that says normal and one that says Alzheimer's. You see, when I mentioned earlier that this disease literally deteriorates the brain, it truly does. On the left-hand side, you'll see that normal brain. That's, some of us might remember that in school when we were doing a dissection of items within biology class. But you'll notice on the right-hand side how the brain is actually shrunk. And you see there's more black spaces in there showing where it is literally deteriorating as time goes on. It is not a, I show this just so that people get an understanding of what happens, or one of the reasons why we hear people asking us the same questions again. It's truly frustrating, that I know, and we wonder why folks are unable to do some of the things that they've done in the past, but hopefully that illustrates the reason why. The brain capacity is truly not there as it once was. So some of these judgment challenges and decision-making challenges, they come as a result of this. Does that all kind of make sense so far? Let's go ahead and talk about some sensitive situations that pop up. First and foremost, I'd like to talk to you about other people. One of the things that I've had people ask me in the past, and I hear it almost on a daily basis, is how do I handle other people when it comes to my loved one? Some of us as caregivers, we might not go out as much as we used to because we might be, there's that E word, embarrassed of some of the actions or behaviors that our loved one might do. And these actions, these behaviors are just, they're the new normal. We hear that phrase a lot these days, but we've been experiencing that already. It's the new norm. Because again, the brain is not able to handle situations the way they used to. So I had someone once ask me, okay, so I would love to take my wife out to a restaurant. How do I do that? Because she might do this or act this way at the restaurant, at the table. What do I do? Well, it could be something as simple as once you arrive, letting the wait staff know, letting the maitre d' know that that you were out taking your wife out on a date, and just kind of on the side letting them know that this is the diagnosis that's been made. But it's her night out, and you're going to make the best of it, as best that you can, and hopefully the best that the restaurant can. Some people have made up little business cards to give to the maitre d' so that they understand what's going on. And a lot of places that understand dementia will try their best to make it just as simple for you as possible. They'll try to speed up the service so that there is the ability for you to get in and go, but still have a good meal and experience that evening. Sometimes it's just a matter of us as caregivers educating people on the disease diagnosis and what it truly means. So we're going to run into those people that don't understand, but that is a great educational time for the folks to actually start to understand, especially if it turns out to be family members who wonder why we don't do the things we used to do. Maybe they might, I don't want to say pressure you to come to an event, but you realize that our loved one is to a point where that event might be too overstimulating. So it's just a matter of us giving them a call and saying, hey, I'd love to attend that. However, my mother probably would not be able to handle the extra stimulus or extra stimuli. So again, please, I'd rather not this just be me lecturing. If you all have questions or examples, if you would like to cite an example that you've experienced, please feel free to do so.
Question, like I've had people say that they've worked really hard to get the whole family together and everyone's united, but then their loved one doesn't want to be around everyone. And so then they feel frustrated. So can you address that and like how to kind of help the family understand that, that their loved one, it's not like they're rejecting them, it's just the Alzheimer's is kicking in.
That's a great question. Thank you, Valerie. That is something that before the event, before the family event, that if nothing else, to touch base with the host, to let them understand or to let them understand where our loved one is at that particular time. So for example, it would be a matter of saying, hey, Valerie, I just want to let you know I appreciate that the invitation. we're going to probably stop by for a few minutes. So you're setting expectations from that point forward. We'll probably stop by for a few minutes. I don't know how long we'll stay. I know that my mom is to the point that too much interaction might be a trigger for her. So in an effort to reduce the opportunity for that trigger to occur, we'll stop, we'll say hi, we'll give everyone an opportunity to see us and for us to see them, exchange a few hugs, but we might leave after 10, 15, 20 minutes, or when I see my mother starting to get a little agitated. It really is a matter of expectations. That way, the host is aware of what's going on. If you're aware of some of the other attendees, you might touch base with them as well, depending on how close you are with them. But I really do like the idea of the business cards, because this way, once you get there, for people that you haven't seen in a while, you can give the business card to them nonchalantly. They can read the card and they can kind of get an idea of, oh, okay, I need to work this a little differently than I used to, because Dorothy is at a different point in life now than she was when I saw her 2 years ago.
Okay, that's helpful.
Now, every situation is going to be a little different. I think many of us may know Johnsy Douglas. She is great with coming up with ideas, and she has a webinar that she does in regard to the holidays, especially now with Memorial Day coming up, although it's a little different this year. But especially around Christmas and Thanksgiving and birthdays, she has a list of things that she provides to folks, and I'll be glad to get that and pass it on if you'd like. But just things to go over with folks. And she actually has a letter also that she drafted that she gives as a template that can be sent out to folks ahead of an event, so they realize, A, this is where mom is now in her disease process. B, this is how mom handles these stimuli. C, these are things to maybe avoid talking to mom about or bringing up to mom, so that we do not trigger a behavior that might not be best for any of us at that particular time. So setting expectations is huge.
Yes, I would comment on that. With the great machines we have today, you can email people all kinds of stuff. And if you think that your loved one is going to be able to tolerate a get-together of multi-people, and you should take that to consideration even before you decide you should go. Like you say, you may just say, well, I can't go. However, if you'd like to go and you think that she would, then I would put together a list, maybe a paragraph too, and send it to the host and ask the host to send it on to these other people who will be there. Set the stage so you don't have to try to do it face to face at that time. That takes all the pressure off of you. You can enjoy it too. Yes. And that way you don't have people standing there and with their mouth open, or doing one of the worst things I see. Oh, you remember who I am? Remember me? Right. And boy, I mean, no, they don't. And that's so frustrating for both of us. I know I've been in groups before I recognized some of this stuff to that point. And this one lady who used to be Betty's very knowledgeable person, they were nurses, of the group of nurses of her graduating class. And this one lady who had every right to believe that she should remember that if you knew the history, because they should have known each other extremely well. But she just kept saying, Betty, you know who I am? You know who I am? What's my name? And I finally said, well, I don't believe I've ever met you. I'm Bill Ackerman. And what is your name?
There you go.
So I just diffused it. But
Yes.
yeah, you're going to get into those awkward situations and you need to prepare the person.
Yes.
And I know, Daryl, you've heard horror stories of going into family reunions where the person just goes absolutely bonkers and may never actually come back to where they were before. So anyway, that's just a piece of input. I really do, though, is if you're caring for somebody, you have to really think through these things as far as physically, can they handle it? And certainly the mental part of it and the stress, all that kind of thing. What we can't tell by looking at a person is where are they? They
Right.
could be a little child at that point, scared to death of this big crowd.
Mhm.
They don't remember anybody. So anyway, I wanted to ask a question just from your experience.
Yes, sir.
Okay. When you look at that brain and you see there's just really a deterioration, but it's pretty consistent throughout the brain. And it gets more and more consistent as it, gets more and more involved. My question is, I wonder sometimes if when I see these swings, and you know what I mean, a high day and a bad day and a high day and a bad day, I tend to believe this, and I have nothing to base it on, that the low days, the ones that are just not a good day at all, are a forecursor of what is probably going to come more often. In other words, it's going to increase. Because if that area of the brain's already started, then it's going to get worse and will probably multiply itself in maybe where you only see it once a week and then maybe twice a week or something like that. And it gets almost, then it's finally there every day. So my question to you is that a correct belief?
That is definitely a great observation, Bill. One of the things that I've noticed is that when it comes to this disease, personally, now speaking personal experience, not medically driven at all, but personally, in my 18 years of working with senior health, there does not necessarily seem to be rhyme nor reason for that progression. I think each of you know that I work at Colonial Gardens, which is we're a dementia unit. We're a 66-bed dementia unit. And I have seen behaviors begin, last 2 or 3 months, and then move on to something else. I don't know if you all remember me telling in the past in other sessions, but we had a gentleman who was here who, out of the blue, just began walking down the hallway, and he would pop people in the face. Now, family members that would come in and visit thought that he was violent. Now, he didn't hit anybody harder than I'm hitting myself right here. And if you ever observed him around his wife, you would notice when she came up to him, he would have a huge smile on his face. He would reach out to her and he'd pat her face. That was his affectionate way of saying hello and greeting his wife, because he was no longer verbally able to say what he wanted to say to her. So he started walking down, and he would do it to certain people. It wasn't everybody. It was consistent with these people, but these are folks that he would tend to hover around, or they would congregate around him. So the question is, some family members would say, no, he attacked my wife or my husband, or was he truly just greeting that individual? But after about 2 or 3 months, it was probably about 4 months, that behavior ceased. and then he moved on to something else. So I've just noticed that behaviors come and go. The important thing to recall with that, though, Bill, is, excuse me, is to just meet a person where they are. That's the biggest thing we can do. If somebody starts talking about Fluffy, and excuse me, sorry about that. If someone starts talking about Fluffy, and we know that Fluffy was their long-haired shepherd that they owned back in 1974, instead of arguing with them and saying, no, you know Fluffy died, and that could become a trigger for an argument, which would be a negative response from our loved one. Instead of arguing with them, we can just say to them, you know, I haven't seen Fluffy in a while. Let's see if we can go look for them. And at that time, we can make a meaningful moment with that individual by looking for Fluffy, even though we know we're not going to find Fluffy, but they don't know Fluffy's not around. So that education that you were talking about there earlier, when you're going somewhere, setting those expectations, letting people know that, hey, these things might occur, making that list is a great idea. We can give them suggestions on how to talk to our loved one. Things to bring up, things not to bring up. Just so we can help include and engage our loved one, as opposed to making it embarrassing for them or anybody else for that matter. And also to help the other individual avoid any confrontation and help avoid correcting our loved one. I think that is huge. Another thing I'd like to address is something that, as the disease progresses, many of us start experiencing our loved one having incontinence issues, be it bowel or bladder. And that can be not only a new issue for us as caregivers, but it's a new issue for our loved ones as well, because it's still a matter of dignity and respect. And our loved one, we might experience them saying, yeah, and I recognize the fact that you're around us all the time, but you're not going to change me. But that person still needs to be changed. They still need to be cleaned up. This is one of those things that it's a natural body function, and it's going to occur. So how do we address that? How do we work with that? One of the big things that I like to suggest to folks is encouraging our loved one to use the restroom a little more frequently than they used to. So if they used to be able to recognize the fact that they had to go, maybe now we start encouraging them to go more often, maybe every 2 hours, every 3 hours. That way, it can hopefully lessen the risk of some of those accidents from occurring. If they are still able to realize that an accident did occur, and it's a matter of seeing where they are when it comes to the fact that we need to get them cleaned up. We can start talking to them ahead of time about, oh, so if we have an accident, you know, of course, I'll always be there for you. Even if you happen to have an accident, I'll be there to help make sure that you stay clean. And you can kind of get a feel for how they react to that. My mother was quick to tell me, baby, you're my son. You're not going to clean me up if I have an accident.
No way.
Which was always fun and frustrating at the same time, because she had to get clean regardless. And at some point in time, we have to recognize the fact that if it becomes a back and forth where we could create that trigger, it might be time to start thinking about help. whether it's help from an agency to have someone come in and help get that individual cleaned, or maybe another family member. So just to kind of give an idea there as well. Some of you know that I love the book that is put out by the National Institute on Aging by the name of, I don't know if you see it, Caring for a Person with Alzheimer's Disease. The piece about Alzheimer's disease really shouldn't just say Alzheimer's disease, because it's for all types of dementia that are there. But one of the things that that book mentions when it comes to incontinence is that once that begins, one of the big things we want to do, if it's becoming, if it's happening more often, we want to make sure that we let the doctor know, because he or she might be able to treat whatever occurrence that's happening. Now, mind you, when it comes to this disease, this is just part of the natural progression with some individuals. But we also want to make sure that we let the doctor know, because there could be a sign of a urinary tract infection, an enlarged prostate gland, too little fluid in the body. Who knows? There could be any number of things, whether it's taking too many diuretics or diabetes or drinking too much caffeine. But the doctor would be able to help guide us in that. So just let's make sure that we touch base with them on that. Some other things that the book mentions as far as a tip is concerned. Of course, like I said, we can remind them to use the restroom a little more often. If a person is starting to go really frequently, a suggestion it makes here is that we can give the person fresh fruit before bedtime instead of fluids. That way they're getting the juices from the fresh fruit, and it helps to quench the thirst. Depending on their stage of dementia, we can mark the bathroom door with a big sign that says toilet or bathroom, helping them recognize that that's the place that they're to use. We want to limit their fluids possibly, if we can, after 6 o'clock. You don't necessarily want to give them things such as caffeine after that time either, like coffee or tea, some sodas. The book also states that when it comes down to it, and I've heard some of us mention this in some of the sessions there at Lisa's, try to see if we can have the loved one wear loose clothing. Something that's loose and comfortable, that does not necessarily have a belt or a waist tie, will help in a time of emergency. So it's easier for them to get that down once we get them to the restroom. And it's easier for them to pull that up, as opposed to them having to fight the belt or fight a tie to get their pants down, thus getting them frustrated, getting them wet, where it could have been avoided if they could just get undressed a little easier. And of course, help show them the way to the bathroom. I think that's huge, and it's actually listed at one of the top of the list here in the book I was just mentioning. Show them how to get there, or better yet, walk with them down the hallway and take them to the restroom. You don't necessarily have to go in if they still have the ability to use the restroom on their own, but you can help guide them there. And if it seems to be a case of an emergency, you're also there beside them so that they don't rush, lose their balance, and possibly have a fall. So a couple other things we might look at as a person progresses in the disease process. Of course, a big common occurrence, folks don't like to shower any longer, or they don't want to take a bath. And that could be for a number of reasons. It could be because of the fact they're unsteady on their feet and they're uncomfortable with stepping into the tub. Or it might be that once they get in the shower, the water beating them on their head is uncomfortable and scary for them. So what suggestions we make for that is to possibly get one of the hand wands for a shower. And instead of starting up top and working our way down, you can help guide them or suggest to them that we start bathing at our feet and spraying the water at our feet and our legs and working our way up. And as you're helping them bathe and you're doing this, let them know, okay, now that we have your feet cleaned, let's see if we can go ahead and get those legs cleaned. We're going to move the water up the leg a little bit. Oh, now it's time to go ahead and get the knees cleaned, and continue telling them step by step what you're going to do, especially once you get around the face, the neck, the top of the head, and around the private areas, because we want to make sure that we're still showing that respect and letting them still have their dignity. Many folks tend to be embarrassed by being uncovered, especially if they get to the point where they don't recognize you. So it's okay to have a towel over their shoulder, covering their chest area, or maybe a towel wrapped around their waist as you're cleaning them. Remember, a towel is going to dry. All we have to do is just throw it in the dryer. But if it's going to give a sense of calm to our loved one, then they deserve that. And what's huge, and again, stating from the book, think of bathing in steps. We want to think of it as before the bath or shower, during the bath and shower, and after the bath and shower. Before the bath, before we bring an individual into the bathroom, we want to make sure that the soap, the towels, the bath cloths, the shampoo, all of that is already in there and ready. We want to make sure that the water is already running and at a comfortable temperature. And of course, it's good to make sure that we have the water coming out at a pressure that's not going to startle our loved one. And the one thing that they state here is be matter of fact with our loved one when it comes to bathing, as opposed to saying, oh, would you like to go take a shower now? Because what do you do when they look at you and say, no, I'm good, thank you. And we have some of our residents here that do that. No, I'm good. I don't need to do that. But it's been a couple days. No, I'll do it later. Now you're in a position of arguments, and that could become a trigger. However, if you're matter of fact and say, it's time for a bath now, it's time for a shower now, let's go take a shower, then a lot of times that's a little more helpful. And remember, again, the whole dignity and respect piece is huge. So we want to be gentle and we want to be respectful. So the best way of doing that is not being rough. We have a tendency as humans to rush through something because I want to get them clean. Well, we don't have to do like we do ourselves and get every spot. We can just get those essential spots to help reduce the smell and make sure that they're clean. But we don't have to be too rough with the individual. That will just have them reject the idea of doing this again. But we want to make sure that we're telling them step by step what it is that we're doing. So if a person is they're not steady on their feet, a good idea might be to run to the store and have a shower chair so that they can sit down in the chair while the shower or bath is being given. And of course, talking is always a good thing. If you can distract the individual who does not like showering, if you can distract them by talking about something else or having them engaged in conversation with some other memory that's going to be a good memory, remember a long-term memory, then that might help with the bath or shower also. And of course, drying them off is going after the shower. Drying them off is going to be huge. We want to make sure that they're completely dry, or as completely dry as possible, to help avoid skin irritation or rashes from beginning. So instead of rubbing the towel, we want to give them the opportunity to see if they're able to dry themselves off. But you want to pat dry those areas, as opposed to, especially if they're older and they're starting to have thinner skin, we want to make sure that we pat them dry. Now, our caregivers here have experienced in the past, some folks have a tendency to want to get combative when we're giving them a shower. And one of the suggestions there is, well, give them a rag or give them a towel. I have had the opportunity of helping give individuals showers here, and one individual comes to mind in particular. And once we were able to give him a towel, he can use that to cover himself. That calmed him down a little bit, so that we can go ahead and talk with him about saying, okay, well, let's go ahead and clean your neck and clean under your arms. And then it progressed to the point where he didn't want us doing that either. So we would give him a rag, and he would try to do these areas himself. Sometimes he would do an area good enough on his own, and sometimes we'd have to help. But you learn those circumstances as they arise, and you work with that as it occurs.
Let me
So-
ask you a question.
Yes, sir, please.
This may be silly, but is there an appropriate way for the person who is doing the caring or washing,
Yes, sir.
to be dressed?
Great question. Not silly at all. It really depends on the individual that person is caring for. Because if an individual is comfortable with you being in the shower with them, then you can, because I know you don't want to necessarily get your clothing all wet either, so you might want to come with shorts and maybe a t-shirt. But if that is going to make an individual uncomfortable, then by all means, wear long pants and even a regular polo shirt. Again, those are things you can take off and dry later on. But if they're uncomfortable with the way you're dressed, then definitely try a different strategy on how to dress. That's a good question, sir.
Since you didn't say get in there naked with them, I'm assuming that is not suggested.
That is not necessarily suggested, no. Not from our experience here. I don't think you would really appreciate us getting undressed with your loved one if your loved one were here. But at the same token, your loved one might not want you undressed either. So if staying dressed seems to work better, stay dressed. How the degree of amount of clothes that you have on really depends on that person's reaction once you're there.
But it's better to start with something on, I hear. Yeah.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes, sir. Again, clothing can always be dried. And if they're uncomfortable, by all means, drape a towel over them, because you might use 2-3 towels, but those can be dried as well.
Right. And your clothes too.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Yes,
That's
sir.
not a big deal. One of the things that I found very helpful is if you have a shower head that's up, high, and you can't adjust it, that's not a good deal.
Correct. That goes back to that shower wand. I call it a shower wand, but one of those heads that are on the hose.
Yeah. But also, because we had one you could actually slide up and down and put it on heights.
Yes,
But
sir.
what's working even better is I went over to Home Depot and got an attachment and another hose and attached 2 hoses together. And with the wand at the end, And you got all kinds of flexibility then.
Yes, sir.
You can, you can lay it on the floor and like you say, you can do whatever part of the body that's comfortable at the time. I know a lot of women don't want to have their hair get wet, and so having that kind of setup works a lot better. And if you haven't got a chair, which I delayed getting a chair for a long time,
Hmm.
because I just didn't know much about them and that kind of thing. Well, I finally got one, and it's fantastic. It's even got a little bit of a rubber pad on the seat and the back.
Yes,
It
sir.
does not transfer hot or cold, and so it's comfortable. And I find now, for myself at 86, that chair is really nice with the two hoses for myself. When you're doing your face and stuff and you get soap in your eyes and
Yes,
you're
sir.
standing up and you can't tell whether you're falling or not, that don't happen when you're in the chair. So, yeah, and I appreciate some of the way you explain things. I really do, because that is a very sensitive issue.
That it is. That it is. And and I appreciate your suggestions. I've never thought about using, doubling up the hose as well. That's a great idea. Now, if our loved one is a fall risk, of course, we want to make sure that we keep that from getting under their feet. But you definitely get that flexibility. So thank you for that input. I appreciate that.
One of the things that I've not experienced, and I'm not sure, maybe you can help me understand. Let's assume they're sitting in a chair,
Okay.
and most of the body is exposed easily. And, I can understand how that would be, you kind of work through that and see what works. But when it gets to the part that you can't reach that's seated, I really hadn't figured that out.
Another great question. There are actually, if you can help them stand, again, talking them through this the whole time, now it's time to go ahead and get these other parts and try to help them stand. And if they'll allow you to get to those spots, that might help. And if that doesn't seem to work, there are chairs similar to what you're speaking of that actually are, for lack of any other way of saying it, they're basically toilet seats for a chair.
Yeah.
So that there is a way to get to those seated spaces as well.
Now they have, I'm thinking through some of this stuff, and I've done some of it. You can go to a place, Home Depots, you can go to Bed Bath and Beyond. They have a multitude of these things that have a little handle at each end. It's a hold on device, okay?
Yes, sir.
Like a bar,
Yes, sir.
except it is loose and you can stick it anywhere in a shower and then activate these two little things that suck that suction cup really tight.
Yes, sir.
And even though they may come a little loose, you can redo them. And I put one up that I've always wanted, and so I got it for myself. As I step in, I can use that.
Yes, sir.
But then they've also have plastic trays and little hooks and all these things. Once they're on there, they really hang on easily. So It would seem to me like that putting up multi of those, where you find, let's say you're trying to get them to stand up for a little bit, maybe right in that point on the shower wall, put another one there, which normally you wouldn't have there.
Right.
I'm thinking through all these things, just trying to see, and the ones that I've experienced have worked well.
Yes.
And I have a little tray. I don't use the normal soap area and shampoo area. I have got one of these little plastic trays with two of those suction things in it. I put it down at chair level, and gives me a place I can also put the wand in when
Yes,
it's
sir.
running.
Mhm.
And so you can still get to the water underneath it. and just things like that. You kind of experience some little tricks as you go through trying to figure out how to do this. So,
You have hit the nail on the head with that, because not all of these tricks will work for everyone and everybody. However, a lot of these work out well depending on the individual, where they are, what stage of the disease they're experiencing. Um, and it just, if it helps 10% of the time, that's 10% less of an issue you had yesterday. The big thing when it comes to bathing is to realize, just like every tip and trick is not necessarily going to work for everybody, the huge thing to remember is, if you're able to get an individual into the shower and you're able to start getting them cleaned somewhat, that's progress.
mm-hmm.
Did you get everything? Maybe not, but that's
Yeah.
okay. You were able to get some things. And again, that was better than yesterday. You might look at a routine or a schedule instead of, a lot of us say, well, because we've all grown up, oh, we have to take a shower every day. Lord knows my son does not want to take a shower every day, and he does not have dementia. But you have someone who has an adverse feeling towards taking a shower, they're not going to want to do it. So instead of it being a daily ritual, 3 times a week might work. That way it might lessen that anxiety the individual might have. If you are seeing that person is having a good day, then let's try to see if now's a good time for a shower, if they're agreeable. We do that a lot here in the building. If we know this person is not going to, because the person might sundown in the afternoon, but they're having a great morning right after they had breakfast, well, throw it out there. Let's go take a shower. Okay. Let's get you shaved up or cleaned up because so-and-so's coming by to see you later on. Okay. Well, okay means let's go for it. We start shaving a person. All right, now we've got y'all shaved up and looking good up here. Let's go ahead and take a shower so that your wife is going to know that you're nice and clean and ready just for her. Okay. Okay is a wonderful thing. Just take it in stages and see how far you can get away with it.
One of the things that occurs to me too as you're talking here is the washcloth. And when I shower, I very seldom, except for certain circumstances, use a washcloth. I do everything by hand,
Uh-huh.
and I've done that for years.
Mm-hmm.
But when you're doing someone else, now I know in your facility, I would think that you use a washcloth every time you touch their body.
Yes,
I would just assume that to be the case.
Yes, sir.
But if you've got someone that is not wanting to shower, and there could be all kinds of reasons for that, you might, I'm going to say that I think you're better off to use a washcloth,
Yes.
regardless of who that person is.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Again, it comes down to the person. You want to make the person, be it your mother, your father, your husband, your wife, your uncle, your aunt, your niece, whomever, you want them as comfortable as possible. And if we have a head start knowing that they used to always use a rag, then by all means, a rag should be the way to go. But as we're starting this process out, a rag is definitely definitely a good start.
Another thing that I've been paying more attention to when I shower is when you open the shower door, no matter how warm the house is, it is cold and it comes in and grabs you. And what I'm thinking about, I got a terry cloth bathrobe and have it hanging in the shower so you wouldn't have to open the door. Shower is nice and warm, right?
Yes, sir.
And after you kind of sponge them off with towels and stuff like that, you can, put that on,
Great idea.
hide, so that when they step out, it's not like going into the Arctic. And that might trigger some more comfortable feeling.
Great idea. Great idea. These are all great points, and I appreciate you bringing those up. Two other quick things I'd like to mention just for the sake of time, and then we can bring it to a close. First and foremost, with the situation being as it is now, with all this COVID stuff, I'd like to address ER visits. God forbid there's something should occur at home where our loved one has to go to the hospital. But if they have to go to the hospital, so many hospitals now are not allowing us as the caregiver to go into the hospital or go with our loved one into the ER, or definitely not to the room to visit or anything of that nature. So I would love to be able to share with you some ways to prepare, even if that doesn't occur. Again, God forbid it should occur, but just some things for us to be ready that we might not have thought about before, because we took things for granted before all this COVID stuff, and we just don't think about, oh, what if I have to make a hospital visit? So let me just give you a couple things here just to list. One thing you want to make sure that you have at all times with your loved one, whether COVID's around or not, is you want to make sure that you have a list of medicines. You want to have that list of medicines ready to go at a moment's notice. So you always want to have it updated. If you should happen to go to the doctor's office and they give a new med, then that new med goes onto that list. If it is only a temporary med that they're going to take, say an antibiotic, and they're only taking it for a couple of weeks, put it on the list, but put beside short term or some indicator that it's not necessarily going to be a long-term thing. Because in a time of crisis, we're not going to think of all the meds that our loved one's going to be on. Many of you know I'm a cardiac patient, and I've had issues over the past couple of years where I've ended up in the hospital. Yeah, Marty, we don't need to talk about that later. No, Keena, no, we don't. Because I'm sitting here now, so obviously I'm okay. But when they started asking me, what are your meds? I couldn't think of them because I was too concerned about what was happening at the moment.
Wow.
So we want to make sure we have a list of the meds. We want to make sure we have a copy of the insurance card. If you keep those copies with your meds, then you don't have to go digging into their purse or wallet, and you'll have it all together. And it's not a matter of having to make a copy once you get to the hospital or the urgent care. It's good to have a copy of their primary care physician's name, office, and their contact information, phone number, and fax, if possible, because if the ER wants to send an update to the doctor's office, they can. Again, having that copy with the copy of the insurance cards and the meds. And also any advance directives. Now, an advance directive can be it could be a DNR, a do not resuscitate. It can be multi-paged. It can be just something that the loved one has scribbled on a napkin one day that you just haven't had an opportunity to have put into a formal form yet. But you want to make sure that you have a copy of that also. Because all these things, especially during this time, once they get to the hospital, all that should be right there in front of them.
Mm-hmm.
You as the caregiver, as the primary caregiver, your contact information should be listed in there as well. Your cell number, your landline, your email address, so that they're able to contact you in some form or fashion. And if you end up getting a new phone number, definitely update that list. Again, crisis time is not the time to start doing these things. Just like we were talking about at the beginning of the session, setting expectations for other individuals to interact with our loved one, we want to be prepared so that whoever our loved one is going to interact with in a medical setting has as much information about them as possible. Even something saying, my husband is a dementia patient. His neurologist is so-and-so, so-and-so, here's their information. The PCP, here's the information. We want to make sure we have those items listed and readily available. So
Power of attorney,
power of attorney as well. Yes, sir.
yes, because they're going to want that.
Yes, sir. And in most cases, a copy is good. So if you have a raised seal copy, you don't necessarily want to give that up. If they need to see it, they'll ask you for the raised seal. But in most cases, a copy will work fine.
Yeah.
But have multiple copies. So and have multiple copies of this package so that if by chance they go to the ER today because of a fall, and 2 weeks from now we have another fall, there's another package ready to go. Because once you give it to the ER, you're not getting that back in most cases. So as you're making these copies, make multiple copies, stick them in envelopes with their name across, name and date of birth across it, so that it can be sent at the time of transport.
That's really good, Daryl. I had never thought to do that kind of a package. You know, where like on a spur of a moment type thing.
Yes, sir. And you might even have a list in that package of behaviors or symptoms, so that the ER is not surprised that this occurs. If your loved one is a wanderer, have it listed so they're aware that this person's a wanderer, so that they're able to put in their wandering protocol, as opposed to them going to see the room and, oh, where does she go? And then she's down the hall.
Yeah. Wow. That's a lot of, yeah. That's really good. I hadn't given that any thought at all.
The last thing I'd like to bring up today is kind of a play on words here, sensitive situation. And this happens more often than people think. And it's kind of an embarrassing topic, and we bring it up sometimes in the there at the building. But just real brief, let's talk about sexuality. In some cases, our spouses, our loved ones, even with dementia, and sometimes because of dementia, they become hypersexual. They just